And we're back with our politics lead candidate. Donald Trump promised to drain the swamp. Has he? Good government groups say actually the Trump administration has too often been bogged down by ethics concerns. And now one Republican senator and frequent critic of the president, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, is introducing an ethics reform bill tomorrow, which would include requiring presidential candidates to release their tax returns. Hello, Donald Trump. Banning cabinet officials from soliciting foreign donations. Hello, Clinton Foundation. Creating a database of HR settlements for members of Congress. Hello, too many to name. And banning members of Congress from making money as lobbyists when they leave office. Again, hello, too many to name. With me is Senator Ben Sasse. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to get to your bill in 1 second, but I do want to ask about Hurricane Florence because obviously it's on everyone's mind. We're all concerned about people in the path of the storm. President Trump saying that the response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, that it was an incredible unsung success. A lot of people upset about that, especially Democrats, but also people in Puerto Rico, since the death toll is estimated to be almost 3,000. You've talked a lot about President Trump and his ability to rise to moments like this or not. What do you make of this?
I didn't see him make those comments, but obviously the Congress needs to do a better job of doing oversight of FEMA across time to see how we respond to these kinds of disasters. And obviously our thoughts are with a lot of the hardworking folks in FEMA and in governors' offices across the coastal states that are worried right now. But I don't think Puerto Rico was some great success, but I think we need to do more oversight to look at how FEMA can get better over time, and hopefully they'll perform this weekend.
Okay, well, let's talk to your ethics bill. One of the things it would do is it would require that presidential and vice presidential candidates release their tax returns that presumably, if this were to pass and be signed by President Trump, would affect President Trump in 2020. Do you think that will prevent it from becoming law, that provision, even though I certainly understand why you put it in there?
I would say that, there are 5 different bills I'm going to introduce tomorrow, and I think a lot of them are going to make everybody mad. There are going to be a lot of oxes gored here because, frankly, every election cycle, people talk a lot about draining the swamp, and then nobody ever does it. It's a campaign issue, and it's a governance issue. Nobody's making progress, and the American people have more and more distrust of the city. So I think there are things about the tax returns provision that has been a norm of American politics for decades.
Yes,
that wasn't followed.
Ford or something.
Yeah, it's never been a law, but everybody has always done it. This is the first time it hasn't happened. The president said he would release them once he got to the election, got the nomination, and then once he got elected, and then he said the people had lost interest. I think there's a lot of distrust. We should release them. But on the other side of the aisle, there are going to be a bunch of Democrats probably frustrated as well. But Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, had lots of public trust responsibilities, and she has family members out there making speeches for 6 figures and enriching the Clinton Foundation at the same time. There's just a lot we need to do to drain this swamp and to tackle the culture of corruption that's in Washington, D.C., because public distrust is only going to get worse in an era of more and more, not just Russia, but Chinese information operations against Washington, D.C., and against public trust in America.
So one of the things that you point out in the bill, one of the things you would point out in the bill is that members of Congress could not become lobbyists. To be frank, what member of Congress is going to, other than you, what member of Congress is going to vote for that? They want to be able to preserve that they'll be able to have some cushy job when they leave the Senate or the House on their own terms or not.
If what I'm talking about here is really that strange in Washington, D.C., then Washington, D.C. is even further removed from the public than a lot of us think. Because
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that they're not going to vote that way.
The founders envisioned a world where the kinds of people who represent the American people in Washington, D.C. do it as a public service for a time, not as a business proposition for how they can cash out afterwards. People are supposed to want to go back to their Mount Vernon afterwards. And if they don't want to do that, they shouldn't do these jobs. These are jobs of public trust. You should prefer to be from where you're from, come here and serve for a while, and go back home.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I can already anticipate critics saying, okay, you have a bill that would have impacted Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. What about Ryan Zinke, Scott Pruitt, Tom Price, cabinet officials of President Trump, 2 of whom resigned under a cloud of ethics complaints, one of whom who's still there, Zinke, all 3 of whom you voted for? What about passing laws that would make it so they didn't have all these ethical concerns?
Yeah, there should probably be lots more. In general, I'm a small government guy who doesn't think we need always to be passing more laws, but at the level of ethics, we need a lot more. So I'm starting out with 5 provisions tomorrow, but my guess is there are 20 or 30 more good ideas people should add to this. Let's build a big package and try to restore some public trust.
But you voted for all of them, and there were, for some of them at least, especially for Pruitt and Tom Price, there were ethical concerns about them raised ahead of time.
I would say in the case of Pruitt, which is by far the most scandalous of all these, almost all of it is stuff that happened once he was in office, and happily people decided that that shouldn't be, and so he was removed from office. But again, if there are more things we should do to tighten the screws on members of Congress and cabinet officials and presidential and vice presidential candidates, let's hear it.
So let's talk about tightening the screws on members of Congress, because President Trump tweeted earlier this month about Republican Congressman Chris Collins and Republican Congressman Duncan Hunter, both of whom have been indicted, writing, quote, two long-running Obama-era investigations of two very popular Republican congressmen were brought to a well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms by the Jeff Sessions Justice Department. Two easy wins now in doubt because there's not enough time. Good job, Jeff. I could spend an hour fact-checking that. Obviously, one of these things happened while Trump was president, not during the Obama. You criticized President Trump for that when he said that. How can you keep him in check? What he's saying there, he's involving himself, at least publicly, with two law enforcement investigations.
Yes, I mean, it's obviously a terrible sentiment the president expressed there. But the core problem is saying something like the Jeff Sessions Justice Department. No, it's actually the People's Justice Department. It's the United States Department of Justice, and it's populated by lots of career officials that are there as public servants. And we want justice to be blind. We don't want one set of rules for a majority party and one set of rules for a minority party, and then elections flip that, and now we got different sets of rules. We want dispassionate justice. We want Lady Liberty to be advanced for the American people without regard to what color jersey public officials are wearing. But when you look at the 2016 election and the dumpster fire it was, most of the people who were voting in that election, there's lots of polling that shows people were more voting against someone than for someone. And so when you talk about the problems of politicizing justice in the Trump tweet like that, or in some Democratic sentiments that we sometimes hear on similar issues, the response for most of the public is, what's wrong with all these people? We shouldn't talk like that. We should want colorblind justice.
All right. Well, best of luck with your legislation, your ethics bill. We really appreciate it. We appreciate anybody in Congress trying to clean up the swamp. It doesn't happen very often.
I'm sure I'm going to lose lots of friends and influence fewer people. We'll see what we can do.
Well, you always have a seat here at this table. Thanks so much,
for having
Senator.
me.
Appreciate it.